Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Outsider. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, you still have Holly processing everything she learned last episode. Because, the crazy thing is, like, she has all this information, because even, like, Howard and, Ralph are all in that thing of like, okay, like, because Howard in particular was like, what is she up to? Because the fact is, Holly ended up telling Ralph about some of the stuff she's looking into, but never got giving all the details. So Howard's like, she's got to be holding back. It's like, why? Well, we know why, because if she came to them with this theory, because Ralph kind of made it clear from the beginning where he stands in this, and even Holly knows how crazy it sounds. Her mind is a little more open to the possibility, but for her, she's like, before I even bring this theory out there, I need to back it up, so she looks into this a lot more, because learning that obviously this creature feeds on grief. What's also interesting is, like, she went back to that bartender and was asking her for, like, because the bartender's the one that's like, oh, yeah, it's almost like an infection that spreads. It's like, you can't spread murder, is what Holly had said last episode. And now she's, bouncing these theories off of, like, if I say grief eater, what do you think about? And it's like, oh, like, bounce off some stuff. But then it's like, are you talking figuratively? Are you talking literally? And it said, like, okay, tear eater or something like that. And then it's like, well, where do you go? A cemetery would be like the go-to place. And then it starts rolling through Holly's mind, because it's like a cemetery would be the perfect place to kind of feed off of grief, because whatever this thing is, obviously it lingers. And so she ends up paying her to actually take her around. And so she actually goes and visits different grave sites at first, like where I think at first she visited the graves of the two kids that Heath quote unquote killed, but it was actually the creature. And then she notices, like, there's a facility, like some abandoned facilities nearby. She does the same thing at Heath's grave and realizes there's more facilities. So it's like, that's what this thing does. It goes nearby graveyards, because it's like it literally squats in nearby places, so it can be soaking in all that grief that ends up popping up in these places. Because it's really interesting when you tie that into whatever it is that Jack... Because obviously, it's like I thought last episode, Jack is making a place for it. Almost like a place for it to kind of stay and hibernate. But I don't know why it's collecting all that junk, why it needs all that. Because even Jack was like, oh, you didn't like the lamp. Why is that? Maybe it doesn't like the light. Maybe it doesn't like anything that might show what it is. I don't know, but because it's out in the daylight, but it has a hood on it and everything. But maybe there's some significance to that. Maybe the light, maybe like I said, or maybe it's just kind of like this weird subconscious thing where it's like kind of like maybe in a way it doesn't like a mirror, because a mirror reminds it what it is, or maybe the light kind of does the same thing. I'm grasping at straws of that particular thing, but it's so interesting that it's picking, like, I guess, like, when it doesn't have a place to kind of like suck on grief, it needs to be somewhere else. It needs to be protected. It needs to be some place to call home. So I don't know. I find that, fascinating in that regard. And then obviously how, everything Holly's doing ends up connecting with that dude. We never find out who he is, but I'm assuming he's not a friend. I assume, because he has a brother, doesn't he? Or maybe I remember now, because they ran down some of his family in last week's episode, but I could have sworn he had a brother. Maybe it's a situation, or maybe that's not even a brother, maybe it's a friend. But like I said, I assumed it was a brother, but regardless, whoever that dude is, we saw obviously in the cold open of it, like obviously we see him dead, but he has the marks on the back of his neck, just like Jack. So it's like, okay, so kind of foreshadowing what Jack's situation might turn out to be. So, so that was interesting. But obviously Holly went over to him to try and talk to him, and he was like that he fucked over Heath, and he fucked me over too. So it's like, okay, so maybe when this thing strikes, it can potentially strike in two folks, because we still don't know 100% like what that mark does. It seems that if you're marked, it has control of you, because like obviously it's like Jack's like, show yourself, and it made him fall to his face. I'm wondering, is it because that mark connects him and makes it so that it basically has complete and utter control over your body? You must enact its will, or it'll make you suffer, type of situation. So it's probably a thing of you can't do anything it doesn't want you to do. Because that's why I'm wondering, because obviously, I'm skipping around here, but that dude ends up killing himself by cop. Now, part of me wonders, was that just because him at the last second making a desperate move because the thing forces you to do certain things, or did he feel like maybe if he's in a public enough area, it won't control him because it's like, oh, it doesn't want public attention. So was that it? Was that a way to kind of get around its grasp of you? Because maybe if you try to kill yourself, it won't let you. Like I said, because it wasn't even near Jack, and yet he fell to the ground like there was some force. Like that thing straight up using the force to kind of push him to the ground. So that's why I'm wondering, not less it's invisible. I mean, because remember when Jack originally got hit, he saw it pop up first, but then like it was behind him. He was like, ow, ow, but there was nothing or no one there. So it might just be that it is invisible. We still don't know the full scope, obviously, but that's the thing. It runs around in a particular form, with the hoodie and the messed up face. So it's like, is that how it always looks? Is it just something that can't be seen by the naked eye in certain regards? Unless you have some connection to it, maybe you can't see it. I don't know what the make it. I mean, it could just be, because I'm about to say, because the kid who stole the van obviously saw it, so that's what I was about to say. Like, maybe it's a thing. I don't know. Maybe it appears to certain people. Like, maybe it's a grief thing. Like, if you are going through some grief or some troubles, maybe, because we did learn that, because Tamika brought it up that Jack's going through. I think it was something about his mom going through a divorce. So it's like maybe he's going through his own grief. The little kid might have been going through some grief because or whatever. So maybe that's why it presents itself in that manner. I don't know. It is really interesting, though. Because, obviously, Holly had gone to Heath's house, and obviously it's boarded up and everything, but obviously looking at the bed, someone put fresh sheets on it, and so she was like, the fact is that looked like someone out of remorse. So it's someone suggesting that maybe Heath wasn't the only one that was committing his murder, so maybe there was someone else at play here. So it begs the question. Now that kind of puts a lot of stuff into focus of making you think like, okay, so we see what's happening with Jack. So maybe, like I said, what I was trying to say earlier is maybe when this thing chooses a form, it also picks an accomplice to potentially help itself. Maybe not. Like, for example, like, we don't know if there was a side person to each of the crimes or something. Maybe that was someone for Heath's case. What about Maria or Terry's case? Maybe there was another person that was infected or something. Maybe the infected person serves some other purpose. Like, when I don't have a form, maybe it's kind of this weird thing where it can only, because we do see this letter from Holly at the end where she was working some stuff out and Andy looks into it. Basically, there's a window period like between each case. It was like 23 days, 24 days, and 20 days. So it can only attack maybe in certain patterns, and then it kind of has to go back in a hibernation type of situation. Maybe it's kind of like Jeepers Creepers, kind of like how that thing. Every 23 years for 23 days it gets to eat type of situation. So maybe this thing only can come out in like spurts of 20s, and then it kind of has to back down because it's too much. I don't know. So maybe it needs people in between, like that dude for Heath, or maybe Jack to kind of work on its behalf type of situation. I don't know. Like I said, just kind of throwing all of this out there. So. And kind of on the other side is obviously the whole situation with Jeannie, which I thought was kind of interesting because obviously we see her at work and there's someone sitting out front with a green hoodie. I'm like, that's weird. I was like, does she know to be on the lookout for that? I don't think she does. So I was like, but I guess it was something caught her off guard about, because she was like, yeah, something's weird about that. And then later on, she sees like, everyone put your hoodies down, and the person in the green wouldn't, but it turns out it's a dude sleeping. Doesn't mean that's the same dude from earlier. So whoever it was probably already keeping an eye on the thing. Is probably keeping an eye on her. But I mean, because that's what I think is interesting. Because I think it chooses Ralph not only because Ralph is investigating, but I also think because Ralph and Jenny are still drowned in the grief of losing their son Derek. That house is reeking of grief. So maybe that's another reason, but more so than anything, stop investigating type of situation. Because Jenny woke up and it was there. And part of me was like, is that actually it or is that Jack? But I think, no, that was straight up it being like, stop investigating or something bad will happen. And it was interesting because it was telling her to sit and she couldn't help herself. So it seems like this thing kind of it definitely has some supernatural powers of its own. Not just like the fact that it can look however it wants and, do what it does, but there's something like there's extra powers that this thing has, because it almost has this like what's the word, some compulsion type of ability, because it told her to sit and she seemed like she couldn't fight it, and then it's just telling her all these things that she's got. It's almost like maybe it radiates this essence of fear that basically intoxicates your body and it just drowns you in fear, so you can't help but listen to what it says. And maybe it kind of radiates that and just kind of drowns you in it. And so It's like, if you don't back down, something bad's going to happen to you and your husband and you. Obviously, and then Jenny wakes up. She's like, wait, did I? What happened? Like, so it's almost like there's a level of fog in it, but there was enough for her to remember. But the thing is, like, was she just simply thinking it as a dream? But then eventually she was like, no, it wasn't a dream. So I'm curious, like, how that whole thing works. Ralph obviously thinks she was just like, oh, you were on medication back then, like, because of your depression and everything after Derek. So you were sleepwalking, and obviously you still do it from time to time. Maybe you're kind of almost hoping to run into him. But Jenny kept being like, no, this is something else. It literally told you to stop investigating. But in his mind, it's like, you're just repeating what Jessa told you. That's got you all worried and everything. This whole Frankie thing has just got you probably thinking more about Derek. But then later on, she draws it. And then Ralph is still kind of like, no, it can't be. It's like, no, you can't deny this. That kid drew you this exact picture of the suspect, and all of a sudden, your wife is saying this is the same person she saw, but he's still thinking like, no, it's a dream, because Ralph is a realist. He thinks like, no, there's got to be some realism to it. There's got to be more to this. So when he talks to Eunice later, he shows it to Eunice. Even Eunice is like, what the hell? He's looking at this from a different perspective than Ralph. Ralph is like, no, she was just having a nightmare. He's like, even if she was, dreams mean something, dude, because he talks about his grandfather and his two brothers went off to war, and their mother had a dream about, what was it, 2 things of milk coming, but she's like, no, I have 3 sons. Wakes up, and one of Eunice's uncles didn't come back from war. His grandfather and his grandfather's other brother came back. So it's like, dreams do mean something. So it's like, okay. So is Ralph going to listen to this? Or that's the big question. I mean, because obviously Ralph is taking leaps on his own, because like the fact of the matter is, Holly called him and was like, yo, can you take pictures of Terry's grave as well as anything nearby? And he's like, why? He's like, I need to know why. She's like, just please just do this for me. And so he's kind of going along with the, step by step. But it's interesting to see, like, that struggle for him to be like trying to look at this any other way than rational, which you can understand. Like, why would you jump to something supernatural? But obviously, like I said, Holly has a much more open mind than him, but even she's like slowly processing this. I'm wondering, I don't think it's her processing it on her, for her sake. I think she's processing it because, once again, like, no one else will listen to her. They'll think she's crazy. She's always been unique, so people are less likely to listen to her, but, that's why she's trying to gather up as much evidence to be like, this is what's happening. You can't deny it when literally all the evidence is kind of pointing at this type of thing, Because what was interesting is the fact is that Ralph had Eunice run, what was his name, Coy, who runs the strip club. But then, like, he was thinking it back to, like, when he ran into Terry, and then he's kind of looking down at his arm because, like, did he get scratched? But then my mind is starting to wonder. I'm like, we'll find out soon enough. But part of me's like, does he have the thing in the back of his neck like Jack does? Was he that, what that dude is to Heath? Like I said, I think that's his brother, but maybe I'm wrong. Like, kind of inserted this thing, the like burn mark or bubbling on the back of your neck. Does he have that? Was him and Terry, was he supposed to be acting like, yeah, you point everything towards Terry? Was that his purpose? Is he kind of being controlled by, because it seemed like, because at first I was like, oh, did that thing switch with him already? But it's like, no. But then again, maybe it's not even that. Maybe once it scratches you, you feel a little off, because maybe you feel it on some like frequency and on some level that, like, it's kind of trying to transform into you. So maybe it's trying to turn into Coit. That's what I would assume, because what did Ralph say? He's like, doesn't that look like he's scratching him? So Hoyt that's probably why he was asking, like, oh, could you check his fingerprints to see if they came up in any shape or form? But I think that's going to be the next person he disguises himself as, going to be Coit committing murders, and maybe Jack's going to be there to kind of help and whatever. I mean, it also, because basically it seems like he's using Jack to get close to Ralph, and it's like, yo, I'm sorry, I wish we could have been friends sooner, blah, 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 blah. I can do whatever I can do to help you. And I'm like, he wants to get close to the investigation to see what they're doing and what they're up to, so he can report back to this thing. Because, once again, it told Ralph to back down, but if Ralph's not backing down, it needs to know what he knows and what he's looking into. And there's all this stuff about what Holly knows. Now, that's going to get interesting when Jack finds out about that, and he brings that back. Because what was interesting is, obviously, like, at Tamika's house, like, they're celebrating and everything. The fact of the matter is, Ralph brings up, oh, yeah, what did you find at that barn? Because I'm skipping over it, but what happens is, Ralph is like, yeah, let me take some pictures. And Eunice is like, holy crap, the barn where we found Terry's clothes, quote unquote, Terry's clothes, it's right across from his grave. And it's like, huh. And now, even Ralph's like, all right, so you had a reason for telling me. It's like, what is it that you found out, Holly? Holly doesn't want to tell him over the phone because it's like, if she can make more of a case in person, they're less likely, because if they're on the phone, they're like, Ralph is more likely just to hang up, being like, oh, you're crazy type of situation. So she has to come face to face. So that's interesting on its own. But obviously, once again, it kind of feeds that theory of like it pits a place nearby so it can suck up all that grief, because there's like, obviously his family came there to grieve him and stuff like that. So you can suck up on their grief of like, oh, they, his daughters lost their dad, and his wife, Glory, lost her husband. So there's that. But I guess the argument could also be for all the people who are, angry at the fact, maybe it still counts as grief for all the people who are angry at the fact is that, Terry, because obviously like the little temporary thing they gave him instead of a tombstone, like Jeannie had found it, but she was like, nope, this isn't it, because they like had defaced it and stuff like that. And she didn't want Gloria to see it. But regardless, Ralph brought up that barn to Jack, and he got agitated. He was like, what? Blah, 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 blah. He kind of got pissed. Like, the fact is you were there too. So like, why, he was getting upset because the thing doesn't want any questions asked. And now Ralph has put him in a complicated situation. And to me, he was like, oh, you want to hold my baby? He's like, no, I'm sick. I'm not doing. And it's like, you're afraid that if you touch that baby, you're going to mark that baby for death. It's kind of what he knows, because he knows this thing likes kids. So it's like, oh, so, or maybe he's afraid the thing's going to use him, control him into doing it. And obviously, like I said, Tamika's asking all these questions, but Jack is like, just drop it, because he cares about her. He doesn't want her to get mixed up in all of this. So, but then Tamika has this dream about said figure in her room getting a baby, and then like she wakes up. I was like, wait, it put you in the haze, didn't it? It actually took your baby, but luckily her husband was outside with the baby. So I'm like, okay, but that doesn't mean the thing didn't come to steal your baby anyway. And even if that, maybe, like I said, like maybe it's creeping into people's minds. Like, that's why I don't think it's just creeping into people's minds. I think it's putting people into a haze where they can't tell whether something was a dream or reality. The thing is, Jeannie dropped her glass. She stepped on the glass. So there's proof of what that happened, that maybe it was in her head, but she did walk. So it makes you think, like, there's no proof to saying, like, Tamika did that, but maybe it's a sign being like that thing is chosen her baby as the next target, or maybe it just did that to kind of get a whiff, and it's just, I don't know. I don't know. But that's, a very interesting element. Now I'm wondering, is that ever going to circle back where Tamika's like, yeah, I had this dream about somebody in a green hoodie, and then Ralph's going to be like, wait, what? Yeah, someone over my baby, it was a crazy dream. But then Ralph's like, all right, this is spreading like wildfire. It's like one person, all right, 2 people, all right, 3 people, now that's a pattern, so maybe not. Maybe Ralph won't think much of it. I mean, Tamika probably won't even think to bring it up. Maybe she will, maybe she'll joke about it. I don't know what to kind of make of that, but I just think that's such a fascinating situation. And on top of that, there's a whole situation with Holly, because obviously she was going to drive back, but then there's the whole thing of her car breaking down, which is like breaking down after everything happened with that dude, circling, what happened at the beginning of the episode, obviously him getting killed by the cops. So it's like, okay, so is that fate being like, whoa, there's more answers here, you just wait around? Like, was that fate trying to keep her in the same spot? Or is that supposed to be something that kind of keep her from getting back soon enough to kind of warn them, because shit's about to hit the fan with Ralph and them? That's what I'm wondering. Like I said, it made a clear threat against him, so I don't know what to kind of make of that. Also, something I forgot to talk about was the whole situation at the very end when Ralph sees his son being like, hey, you need to forget about me. And immediately my mom was like, wait, you don't think this is that creature pretending to be his son? I mean, all it needs is DNA, but that would mean it would have to go and dig up DNA from Ralph. I mean from Derek's body, and maybe that's going to be something we get revealed, like, oh, it did that. But I mean, maybe there's enough DNA rolling around. I feel like it probably has to be fresh DNA. I mean, we don't really know the full ins and outs. But then I think it's like Eunice said, dreams tell you something. Eunice is being like, Eunice had said that, so it's like maybe Derek is trying to tell his dad, you need to move on because your grief is you're not at your best, because you're so driven by your grief and stuff like that. That's all you're seeing, that you're looking through that lens, because you're like, oh yeah, Jeannie is suffering just like you are, so you're only looking at it for like, oh, it's because she's going through grief that she's like, he's not looking at this because he's so caught up in his own grief. Maybe he's not looking at this the way he needs to, or maybe it's kind of implying what I brought up earlier, because they are still so in grief that this thing is going to stay around unless he gets over, like, it's like you leave me behind, you basically move on, don't drown in your grief is kind of what I'm assuming. But once again, maybe it's supposed to be like, oh, maybe there's something more to it, or maybe it's just his subconscious telling him that. Obviously, I think there is more to it than that, but it's like, what exactly? Like I said, that's where my mind is. I'm leaning more towards the latter, that it is just actually his son, like, trying to reach him to be like, Dad, like, you need to kind of move on. But like I said, there's still a part of my brain that it might be disguising as Derek, but I don't think so. Cause I feel like it wouldn't go through that much in that form for just to tell him to kind of move on from me. So, maybe none. A lot of stuff is kind of flooding through my mind because of all this. Ultimately, I'm very interested to see where it all ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.